Welcome to another deep dive. This time, it's all about the future of solar and wind power right here in the US.
Yeah, pretty hot topic these days, huh?
It really is, and I think a lot of people are kind of, beyond the headlines and really want to get into what's actually going on. So we're going to be digging into an article called Renewable Energy, the Future of Solar and Wind Power.
Okay,
And it is, well, packed with insights.
looking forward to this.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about whether solar can really be reliable year-round, how this transition impacts communities that have relied on fossil fuels, and even whether renewable energy is as green as it seems.
Right, right. I mean, it's a fascinating time, wouldn't you say? The
Yeah.
need to move away from fossil fuels is, I think, pretty clear.
Yeah,
And the tech to do it is just changing so fast.
totally. So let's start with solar power.
Yep.
It's getting cheaper all the time. I mean, the cost per watt has dropped something like, what, 80% in the last decade?
Yeah, it's pretty remarkable.
And that's driving huge adoption. We're talking nearly 4% of U.S. electricity already coming from solar.
Yeah, and I think what's really fascinating here is the potential for growth.
Yeah.
I mean, some projections show that number could increase like tenfold in the next 2 decades.
Wow.
But there are definitely some challenges ahead.
Yeah, like what happens in areas that don't have as much sunshine? I'm thinking like the Pacific Northwest or the Northeast. Is solar even like an option for them?
That is one of the key questions that a lot of policymakers are grappling with. Even in sunnier areas, you have this challenge of intermittency. What happens on cloudy days? What about during the shorter days of winter?
Right, that brings us to this issue of storage, which the article really emphasized. If we want solar to be like a primary energy source, we got to figure out how to store all that power for when the sun isn't cooperating.
Exactly. Battery technology is it's advancing, but it's still a major hurdle.
Yeah.
The dominant technology right now is lithium-ion batteries.
Okay.
The same type that's used in electric vehicles. But scaling them up for grid level storage,
Right.
it's a huge undertaking. And it raises some important questions about the environmental impact of mining lithium and other rare earth metals.
Yeah, the article mentioned some pretty harrowing conditions in those mines, and the ethical concerns around labor practices are huge.
Yeah,
It makes you wonder about the trade-offs involved.
absolutely. Another issue with lithium-ion batteries is the cost.
Right.
They are expensive.
Yeah.
And while prices are coming down, it's still a major factor in the overall cost of these renewable energy systems.
Speaking of costs, what about the upfront investment in solar panels? I mean, it's not exactly pocket change, especially for lower income households.
That's right. Financial barriers are a real concern.
Yeah.
The investment tax credit, which is a federal incentive that helps offset the cost of installing solar, has been instrumental in driving adoption. But even with incentives, affordability remains a challenge for many.
So solar has its pros and cons. Let's turn our attention to wind power. It's already a major player in the U.S., especially in the Great Plains. We're talking almost 10% of our electricity coming from wind.
Yeah, and that figure is expected to rise significantly. Advances in turbine technology have made wind power much more efficient and cost competitive. The U.S. has just vast wind resources, particularly in the Midwest and offshore along the coasts.
The article specifically mentioned offshore wind farms. It seems like they have huge potential, but there's also a lot of pushback from coastal communities.
Right.
Worried about the visual impact, potential harm to marine life, and effects on industries like tourism and fishing.
Yeah, the concerns of local communities are certainly valid. They need to be considered carefully. And it raises the question of how do we balance the need for clean energy with the potential impacts on local environments and livelihoods.
Right.
Is there a way to develop offshore wind responsibly, or are the risks just too great?
It's a tough question. And solar, wind power isn't without its technical challenges. Even if we address the visual and environmental concerns, we still need to find a way to make wind power more reliable.
Right.
It's not always windy, which means we're back to that storage problem.
You're hitting on a critical point. Storage is it's the Achilles heel for both solar and wind power.
Yeah.
Until we have reliable and cost-effective ways to store that excess energy, the intermittency of these sources will continue to pose a major challenge to grid stability.
So it seems like storage is the issue. What are some of the alternatives to lithium-ion batteries being explored?
Well, one promising option is pumped hydro storage.
Pumped hydro.
It's a relatively simple concept. You use excess electricity to pump water uphill to a reservoir.
Okay.
And then when you need power, you release the water downhill to generate electricity via turbines.
Interesting. Is that something that could be implemented widely?
It has potential,
Yeah.
but it does require very specific geographic features. So it's not suitable for every location.
Makes sense.
Another idea that's gaining traction is hydrogen storage.
Okay.
So excess electricity is used to create hydrogen gas, which can be stored and later converted back into electricity when needed.
Yeah, hydrogen is getting a lot of attention these days. Is it a viable solution for grid scale storage?
There's still a lot of research and development needed, but it holds promise.
Okay.
Both pumped hydro and hydrogen storage are examples of, how innovation is trying to address the storage challenge.
Right.
But the question remains, are these solutions scalable and affordable enough to support a large-scale transition to renewable energy?
And who's going to foot the bill for developing and deploying these technologies? Is it the government's responsibility, or should it be left to the private sector?
That's a question at the heart of many policy debates surrounding renewable energy.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about the technological and economic aspects of solar and wind power, but what about the environmental impacts?
Right.
Are these sources truly green, or are there hidden costs?
That's where things get nuanced. While solar and wind are undeniably cleaner than fossil fuels in terms of greenhouse gas emissions, they do have environmental impacts that need to be considered.
Yeah, the article mentioned that the manufacturing process for solar panels requires a lot of water and minerals like cadmium and tellurium, and mining these materials can have, harmful effects on the environment.
That's right. Life cycle analysis is crucial when evaluating the environmental impact of any technology. We need to look beyond just the operational phase and consider the entire life cycle, from resource extraction and manufacturing to disposal and recycling.
And what about solar panel disposal? They contain toxic materials. Figuring out how to handle them safely is a growing concern. Makes you wonder if solar can really be considered green with all these factors in play.
It's a valid point. The disposal of solar panels is an issue that the industry is working to address, but it's certainly something to consider when assessing the overall environmental impact.
And wind power has its own set of environmental concerns, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
One of the most common concerns is the impact on birds and bats, which can collide with turbine blades.
The article mentioned that while bird and bat deaths are a legitimate concern, the number of fatalities caused by wind turbines is significantly lower than those caused by other human-related factors, like, collisions with buildings and vehicles.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still something that researchers are trying to mitigate.
Right. Another concern with wind power is the land use required for wind farms, especially large-scale installations. This can have implications for wildlife habitats and ecosystems.
So even though solar and wind offer a cleaner alternative to fossil fuels, they're not without their environmental trade-offs. It's a complex equation.
It is. There's no easy answer.
Yeah.
We need to carefully weigh the benefits against the potential risks and strive to develop these technologies in a way that minimizes their environmental impact.
Right.
And that brings us to another critical aspect of the renewable energy transition, the economic implications.
Let's talk money.
All right.
We've touched on the costs of solar panels and battery storage, but the transition to a renewable energy economy is going to require a massive investment overall.
It is, yeah.
Who pays for all of this?
That's the million-dollar question, literally, and there's no easy answer. It's going to require a combination of public and private investment, along with smart policies that incentivize the development and deployment of these renewable energy technologies.
The article highlighted the debate over the role of government in funding this clean energy transition. Some argue that substantial government investment is essential to accelerate the shift away from fossil fuels and ensure a just transition for workers and communities that depend on those industries.
Right. Others argue that government intervention distorts the market, and that renewable energy should be allowed to compete on a level playing field with fossil fuels. They worry about the economic burden on taxpayers and potential government overreach.
It sounds like there are strong arguments on both sides.
There are, yeah. And this debate is playing out in policy decisions across the country. States are grappling with how to incentivize renewable energy development while also protecting consumers and ensuring grid reliability.
The article pointed out that job creation is a key part of the economic equation. Renewable energy is creating new jobs in manufacturing, installation, and maintenance. But these jobs aren't always located in the same places where fossil fuel jobs are being lost.
That's where the concept of a just transition comes in. It's about ensuring that the shift to renewable energy doesn't leave workers and communities behind.
Can you elaborate on what a just transition entails?
Yeah, it's about providing support for workers who are displaced from fossil fuel industries, such as retraining programs and job placement assistance.
Okay.
It's also about investing in economic diversification in communities that are heavily reliant on fossil fuels, so they're not left behind in the transition.
It sounds like a complex and multifaceted challenge.
It is,
Yeah.
but it's a challenge we need to address if we want to ensure that the benefits of the clean energy transition are shared equitably.
So we've got the technological challenges, the environmental considerations, and the economic implications.
Right.
Seems like there's a lot to grapple with when it comes to the future of solar and wind power.
There is. And all of this is happening within a political landscape that is often deeply divided.
You would think that with the urgency of climate change and the potential economic benefits of renewable energy, there would be more agreement on how to move forward.
Yeah, you would think so.
But the reality is more complicated, Ralph.
Much more complicated. While there is growing bipartisan support for renewable energy, particularly when it comes to energy independence and reducing our reliance on foreign sources, there's still significant differences in how the two major political parties approach this issue.
The article mentioned that Democrats generally favor a more active role for the government in promoting and investing in renewable energy. They see it as essential to accelerate the transition and address the climate crisis.
Right. Republicans, on the other hand, tend to prefer a more market-driven approach with less government intervention and more emphasis on private sector solutions. They often express concerns about the costs of government programs and the potential for regulatory burdens to stifle innovation.
So even though there's some common ground, the political landscape is still pretty polarized when it comes to the details of how we get to a cleaner energy future.
That's a fair assessment. And it makes the task of crafting effective energy policy all the more challenging. The question is, can we find a way to bridge this political divide and reach consensus on a path forward that balances economic, environmental, and social priorities?
That's a big question. And it's one that policymakers are wrestling with right now. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out.
Indeed. The future of solar and wind power in the U.S. is still being written.
It sure is.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a fascinating landscape to try to navigate, wouldn't you say?
It is.
I mean, we have this, a real opportunity to change how we do energy for the better.
Right.
But there are just so many factors to consider.
Totally. And I'm sure some listeners are thinking like, okay, this is all very interesting, but what does it mean for me? Like, if I want to be a part of this clean energy future, where do I even start?
Well, one thing that I think often gets overlooked is just our own energy consumption habits.
Okay.
Even small changes, can make a difference.
Right.
Think about switching to LED light bulbs, being more mindful of your thermostat settings, choosing energy efficient appliances when it's time to replace old ones.
Those are great kind of like everyday actions. But what about some of the bigger steps? Like, say someone is considering solar panels on their roof.
Right.
That seems like a significant commitment.
It certainly can be. And it's important to do your research and understand the financial implications. Installing solar panels is an investment, but there are often, financial incentives available.
Yeah.
And the long-term savings can be substantial.
Right.
Plus, you're generating your own clean energy, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. What about those community solar programs I've been hearing about?
Oh, yeah. Are those a good option for people who, can't or don't want to install panels on their own property?
Absolutely. Community solar is a fantastic way to participate in the solar revolution without having to install panels yourself.
Okay.
You essentially subscribe to a share of a larger solar project.
Right.
And you receive credits on your electricity bill based on the energy that your share generates. It's a great way to support renewable energy and potentially save money, even if you rent or don't have a suitable roof for solar panels.
So there are, options for getting involved at the individual level, but we can't ignore the kind of larger, like, systemic changes that need to happen, right?
Right.
We need businesses and governments to, like, step up and make bold commitments to renewable energy. You're absolutely right. I mean, individual actions are important, but they can only take us so far. We need corporations to set, ambitious targets for reducing their emissions, invest in renewable energy sources. We need governments to implement policies that support the growth of clean energy and phase out fossil fuel subsidies.
Yeah, it feels like there's a growing movement pushing for these kinds of changes. Are you optimistic about the future of renewable energy, given all the challenges we've discussed? What gives you hope?
Despite the hurdles, I do see reasons for optimism.
Okay.
The cost of renewable energy technologies has been steadily declining, making them more competitive with fossil fuels.
Okay.
And as technology continues to advance, we can expect even greater efficiency and affordability.
So the economics are starting to make more sense.
Right.
What else makes you hopeful?
I think public awareness of climate change has grown significantly in recent years.
Yeah.
More and more people understand the urgency of the issue and are demanding action from their leaders. And this growing public pressure is starting to translate into policy changes and investments in clean energy.
So you're saying that even though we're facing like this daunting challenge, the momentum for change is building.
Yes, I believe that the transition to a clean energy future is underway.
That's great to hear.
And while there will be bumps along the road, I'm confident that we're moving in the right direction.
That's a powerful message of hope, but it's important to remember that this transition won't happen overnight.
Exactly. It's a long-term process that requires sustained effort and commitment from individuals, businesses, and governments alike. We need to be patient, persistent, and willing to work together to overcome the inevitable obstacles that will arise.
Well said. And I think that's an important point to underscore. We're all in this together.
We are.
If we want to build a clean energy future, we need to collaborate and support each other along the way.
I couldn't agree more. This is a shared responsibility.
Yeah.
And it's an opportunity for us to reimagine our relationship with energy and create a more sustainable and equitable world for ourselves and future generations.
As we've been discussing the future of solar and wind power, it's become clear that this isn't just about technology or economics. It's about people, it's about the choices we make and the future we want to build together.
That's a great point.
Yeah.
The transition to a clean energy economy is about more than just changing the way we generate electricity. It's about transforming our entire energy system and the way we live our lives.
It's about addressing climate change, creating jobs, ensuring energy security, and building a more just and sustainable world. And that involves a lot of complex, like social and political considerations.
Absolutely. And we can't shy away from those complexities. We need to have open and honest conversations about the challenges and opportunities ahead and work together to find solutions that work for everyone.
It strikes me that, even though there's kind of like this broad agreement that we need to transition to cleaner energy, the how is where things get tricky. We've touched on the political divide,
right?
But it seems like there's even disagreement within those like broad categories of pro renewables and pro fossil fuels, right?
Yeah, you're right. The political landscape is more nuanced than it might appear at first glance.
Yeah.
Even within the same party, you'll find a range of views on the best way to approach the clean energy transition.
So how do we move forward when there's so much disagreement, even among people who share the same goals? Like, how do we find common ground and start working together on solutions?
Yeah.
It can feel pretty overwhelming.
It's definitely a challenge, but I think one way to start is by focusing on the areas where we do agree.
Okay.
For example, both Republicans and Democrats generally support energy independence and reducing our reliance on foreign sources of energy.
Right, and there's also like a growing recognition of the economic benefits of a clean energy economy. The article mentioned that renewable energy is creating new jobs and attracting investment.
Exactly, and as the costs of renewable energy technologies continue to decline, they're becoming increasingly competitive with fossil fuels.
Right.
Even without considering the environmental benefits.
So maybe instead of getting bogged down in like ideological debates, we can start by highlighting the areas of common ground and building from there.
I think that's a good strategy, and it's also important to remember that there are many different perspectives within each political party.
Yeah.
Not all Republicans oppose government investment in renewable energy, and not all Democrats are comfortable with the potential trade-offs associated with certain clean energy technologies. We need to avoid oversimplifying the political landscape.
That makes sense. It's easy to fall into an us versus them mentality, but the reality is much more complex.
It is, yeah.
We need to be willing to listen to each other, understand different perspectives, and recognize that there are many different paths we can take to reach a cleaner energy future.
I agree. It's through those open and honest conversations where we acknowledge the complexities and respect different viewpoints that we can begin to build consensus and find solutions that work for everyone.
It sounds like there's no one size fits all answer.
Right.
The best approach for one community might not be the right fit for another.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We need to embrace flexibility and tailor solutions to specific contexts.
Right.
What works in a rural community with abundant wind resources might not be feasible in a densely populated urban area.
And we need to consider the social and economic implications of the clean energy transition. We've talked about the need for a just transition for workers and communities that depend on fossil fuel industries.
Yes, ensuring that no one is left behind is crucial. We need to invest in retraining programs, job creation initiatives, and economic diversification in those communities that are most impacted by the shift away from fossil fuels.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into solar and wind power, what's the one key takeaway you want our listeners to remember?
I think the most important thing to remember is that the future of energy is not predetermined.
Okay.
It's something we're creating together through our choices, our actions, and our collective will. And while there are certainly challenges ahead, there's also immense potential for innovation, progress, and a more sustainable future.
And to bring it back to our listener who's already tuned into this topic, let's leave them with something to chew on. If you were in charge of energy policy, what would your priorities be? What trade-offs would you be willing to make? It's a complex question with no easy answers, but it's one that we all need to be thinking about.
Absolutely. The future of solar and wind power, the future of energy as a whole, depends on the choices we make today.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the future of solar and wind power in the U.S. It's been an enlightening conversation.
It's been a pleasure. And remember, keep learning, stay engaged, and let's work together to build a cleaner, more sustainable energy future.